Welcome to Educate, Inform, and Challenge. My name is Teresa MacLennan. I'm Executive Director of the Women and Children's Shelter of Barrie. We are so glad that you have joined us today. Of course, the goal of our show is to talk about the lives and experiences of women. We talk about violence against women, human trafficking. We talk about women in leadership and business leaders. And we're really glad that you've come along this journey with us. Before we begin to talk to our wonderful guests today, we do want to acknowledge our Indigenous community. Thank you for allowing us to have these conversations in this space. We appreciate your culture, your heritage, the knowledge sharing. Thank you. So I am delighted today to welcome my guest, Emily. And Emily is someone who works here at the Women and Children's Shelter of Barrie. But instead of me, introducing her, I'm going to hand it over to Emily. Welcome, Emily. And would you like to just tell the folks a little bit about yourself and what your role is here at the agency?
Sure. So as Teresa said, my name is Emily McMurray, and I work for the Violence Prevention Program, which is funded through the Women and Children's Shelter. It's a program that we offer to reach out locally to youth to get the message out about what violence prevention is and share what we believe to be safety tips and various topics that we go into schools and youth groups and different sorts of youth-centered programs and just share our message about it.
Terrific. So you just gave a wonderful overview about the goal of the program. Why is talking to youth about violence prevention so important?
So the Violence Prevention Program, to be speaking to youth about that, is so important because the goal of our program is to shift attitudes that our society has about behaviors that perpetuate violence. So we go to these youth and we discuss what healthy societal behaviors within relationships look like and just spread that message to them. So moving forward in their relationships, they can take those tips with them to help perpetuate healthy relationships amongst themselves.
So why is there a need to have these conversations? Because we would understand that youth are having conversations in schools about healthy relationships, or maybe not so. So what have you seen? Why do you think that these conversations are so important?
So they are important because it's definitely common that youth that witness violence within relationships, whether it be at home, through the media, through different sorts of outlets that see these violent relationships take place, then have a higher likelihood to go through their relationships in life, also partaking in violent relationships themselves.
Mm-hmm. And parents may not feel fully equipped to be able to talk to their kids about what a healthy relationship looks like, or even maybe the red flags that a relationship is perhaps an abusive one. And maybe parents also aren't feeling like they have all the answers either. And so I really appreciate what you're saying, because we want to inform parents, I guess, as much as possible about what a healthy relationship looks like and all of the different factors in that, right? If you were to kind of give us a quick overview, what are some of the topics that you talk about when you're offering these programs to the schools? What are some of the things that you're talking about with the teachers and the students?
So for sure. So the Violence Prevention Program specifically has 10 topics. Most commonly in schools, we're covering boundary setting and communication. Anger and assertiveness is another one we talk about. Diversity and discrimination, relationship dynamics and violence. We also cover cyber safety and technology as well. And another one that we cover is human trafficking. That is quite a popular topic that we talk about in schools as well.
Wow, that is a very fulsome list. And when you were deciding and thinking about topics that would be relevant to youth, is it because that's what they want to know about, what's on their mind, and it's in relation to the issues of today?
So again, a lot of it does have to do with youth impacted things. So many of the topics we do cover, youth are unfortunately the primary targets or subjects of what we are covering. So to get these messages out to the youth is the most important thing so that they're equipped to deal with these things moving forward.
I know I've had some interviews in the past where we've, talked about violence prevention. And one of the key things that we talked about was understanding consent.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to review that with you because I think it's so helpful for any parents and youth that are watching here, right? What do you think the misunderstanding about consent is in regards to a relationship between youth?
So the most common misunderstanding that I see when I'm out speaking to the youth is the idea that consent is purely a sexual agreement. So consent can be applied to anything in your life. It can be a photo that you don't want uploaded. It can be a personal boundary you don't want crossed regarding touch, regarding personal space, even conversations you're not comfortable having. So the idea that consent is purely just a sexual concept, that's definitely a big misunderstanding. Mm-hmm. And one of the facts that we actually share within our program is that only 40% of Canadians truly understand what consent is and how it works.
So it's not just a youth misunderstanding, yes. Which we can see how that would make it challenging for parents or adults who have that misunderstanding to be able to educate the youth about that. Yes. If you were to educate us very quickly about that, what would you say about the relationship between intoxication and consent?
So if a person is intoxicated, inebriated, unconscious, consent cannot be given at all. So consent has to be a decision that's made in clear mind, it's reversible, and it has to be enthusiastically given. So if somebody is unable to speak, they obviously cannot provide that consent.
So no matter what, even if someone is intoxicated and they are saying yes, 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 mm-hmm. with the understanding that the person is intoxicated, it actually has to mean no, no, no.
Exactly.
You have to assume that there is not implied consent, even if the person is saying yes. And I think that is so critical because we do hear of many sexual assaults where alcohol and substance use has been a factor. And how does that interplay with someone saying, well, she provided consent, even though she actually was not in the right mind to be able to do that. So I really appreciate that because it is just highlighting for myself and hopefully for our viewers, the need to have these conversations.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So what have you found is the gaps for the youth that you're talking to? Because they're having conversations in the classroom, but what kind of questions are they bringing to you that they actually want to know about that they don't feel they're getting the information about?
So again, circling back, a lot of it is getting that clarity on what consent is and how it looks like. And there's lots of conversations about the guilt that comes along with setting your own boundaries, saying it's a new relationship, for example, and setting the boundaries. Well, I'm not comfortable with this, but then getting that pressure back. Well, my last relationship was this, or I'm used to experiencing this. So there's quite a few conversations that we have about guilt and also just cyber safety. I've had a few comments that they didn't realize that there could actually be digital abuse going on within a relationship, whether, again, that be with a partner, within a family, a work relationship, even peers.
Yeah. Do you see a difference in when you're offering these courses? Do you see a difference in the perspective between young men and young women?
Yes. So there is definitely the societal expectation between what's acceptable for a young man and what's acceptable for a young woman is very, very different. So in one of our programs, we have a safety list that we like to go over. So we would talk about how a young man would go about keeping himself safe walking home at night. And then we talk about how a young woman would go about keeping herself safe walking home at night. And those visual differences that we see within the two lists are very, very large. And a lot of the time that opens the door for really great conversation within the youth.
And does it feel like when you're having those conversations that there's a freedom amongst the youth to talk openly and honestly with you? And is that in some way related to that you're a safe person to ask those questions to?
So we definitely, when presenting, especially in a classroom, because it's not always the most comfortable position, we would come in, we're kind of outside, they don't know us. We definitely would make it our goal to inform the kids that if they would like to share, we would love it. If they don't want to share, there's absolutely no pressure to share. But whatever is shared, we ask it stays within the classroom and within our speaking group, so that if something personal is disclosed, it stays within us and it's not spread around on social media, throughout the school, or even taken home to siblings, for example.
Mm-hmm. And I should imagine that your conversations are very supportive of conversations that the teachers are trying to have in their classroom. And, you know, a few years ago, there was changes to the sex ed curriculums in terms of the schools and what teachers were able to talk about in the classroom. And we received so many requests from schools to come out and do our violence prevention program, because they really wanted the support and recognize that the kids have these questions and want to have this learning and be able to openly talk about it and learn. And then the teachers were sort of feeling like their hands were tied in terms of the amount of information. Do you feel that the content of what you're offering is meeting the needs of the youth, but also supporting the conversations that the teachers are trying to have?
Yes, and that's a perfect bridgeway, because what is able to be covered through the school curriculum, we are able to dive in a little bit deeper to take it outside of the school into relationships that you're developing, whether again that be with partners, with friends. We dive a little bit deeper into the meanings of consent and what it looks like, and setting boundaries that you're comfortable with within relationships. So we do try to partner those with the conversations going on in the classroom so that they do marry well into each other.
So without bridging any kind of confidentiality of those discussions, I should imagine that you've heard some very interesting comments or conversations in those learnings. Can you tell us just a little bit about that?
So yes, as you said, we've had some interesting comments put forward. One of the most recent comments that I got was the comparison of your safety as a Canadian woman, even approaching a situation versus an American woman. And that was an angle that I don't think me and my partner had thought about, but she brought that aspect to the conversation, and it was a wonderful discussion. It opened up a lot of doors for different comments and feelings and opinions that people had.
That's excellent, really. And because I would think that you need to be thinking always in presenting your curriculum about the diversity, and that it's inclusion of everyone who's in that classroom, right? And we certainly in the shelter are seeing such an increase in the amount of immigrant and refugee women, which, they're coming here with their families and their children. And so there is this incredible cultural perspective as well. And I would be very curious to talk to you more about that. So, we're just starting to get our conversation going here with Emily, and we're going to take a short break and we're going to dive right back in. So please stay with us and we will be right back.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
It's about sharing and caring. It's about doing and belonging. It's about living life to its fullest. And it's about laughing out loud. We are L'Arche Canada, and we're about witnessing and sharing the gifts of all people. Learn more about us today.
back to Educate, Inform, and Challenge. We're having a great conversation with Emily today. We're talking about our violence prevention program and why is that so important. And Emily has just really shared some great insights with us about misconception and misinformation that our youth can have about what a healthy relationship looks like, risks for human trafficking. And we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. But Emily, I understand that you've got some stats that will really help to highlight the reason behind the work that you're doing and the importance of that. What would you like to tell us about that?
Okay, for sure. So one of the first stats that we share at the beginning of one of our presentations is that as of 2021, so this is last year, a woman in Canada is murdered by an intimate partner every 6 days. So that is quite a shocking stat. Not a lot of people know that that information is out there. It is easily accessible. You can search up on Google and you can find more information out about that. And the most vulnerable age for sex trafficking recruitment in Canada is between the ages of 13 and 16 years old. And Simcoe County, so here in Barrie and the surrounding area, is number 2 in Ontario for human trafficking, unfortunately. And women of the ages of 15 and 24 have reported experiencing sexual assault twice as many as any other group of women.
And we know that that number is even larger for Indigenous women, folks from the LGBTQ plus community, and women of color. And I appreciate the stats that you're sharing about human trafficking in particular, because of course we support women who are involved in human trafficking here in our shelter. And we know that early grooming of youth can happen, 11 years old used to be the number that was floated around, but now we know that that is actually more like 9 to 11 years old is a key primary target age for grooming of human trafficking. And so again, I think that just really highlights the need to be having conversation with youth at such an incredible age without traumatizing them, of course, because I should imagine that your content needs to be age appropriate. What would you say about that too?
Yes, it definitely comes with its challenges. So every single one of our topics, we have a primary presentation, and then we have the junior version for some of the younger folks that we may be reaching out to, which does have all of the same ideas. It's just presented in a way that they will understand and that is targeted towards their age groups, because the problems a 13-year-old facing may not necessarily be the same problems that a 18 to 20-year-old is going to face.
Absolutely. And that's wonderful. And I think about gearing your content to age and then also learning style and learning ability too, right? Because
yes.
All of us, we don't take in the same information that somebody else sitting beside us would hear, right? So I love that you've thought about everything in terms of how to offer the materials and the intent behind it. So I want to talk a little bit about the actual content in some of the material. If I am asking you, what are you talking about with the youth when I say building healthy relationships? What are some of the things that you're trying to educate the youth about?
So for the building healthy relationships one, we like to focus on the communication piece, trying to have as much equality and balance in the relationship as possible. And then we dive deeper into the things like financial responsibilities, or if there's kids involved, we can dive into things like that. We also like to teach our I statements. We like to teach about consent, respectful communication. And then going on to the more not so great side, we definitely take a dive into what an abusive relationship looks like, what that borderline abuse looks like, and the tips and the tools about how you can possibly get yourself out of one of those situations and what it can look like starting to lead into one of those situations.
Have you had sharing amongst the participants about their own personal experiences in unhealthy relationships and what those look like?
Yeah. So again, we have had some disclosures within our groups. We've also had some really great moments of reflection that some of these people have chosen to share, whether that be taking us back to a situation they had with their partner, or a situation that they felt they were being triggered with a stepchild, for example. So we've had some really great disclosures that have led to some really, really, really wonderful discussions amongst the group or amongst their support person after the fact. And we've received emails about how great that those recognitions and realizations were for them.
And just for clarity, is the teacher in the classroom when you're having these conversations? Okay. And if you had a disclosure of sexual abuse of a youth, you just want clarity for our viewers about a duty to report. Can you just explain that process for them?
So again, if there was a disclosure to us and to the teacher within the classroom, the duty to report, I believe, would go to the teacher, and the teacher would take the necessary steps to provide every support that that student could need within the school day, and if needed, reach out to parents alongside the student as well. And at the end of our presentations, we also provide a multitude of resources that can provide supports to you, to the youth, to the families, and there's direct hotlines if you need support in that moment as well.
Terrific, terrific. Yes, because, well, I'm a registered social worker and have always had a duty to report if I ever heard of or felt that a child was at risk of any kind of harm. And really, all of us as members of a community have a duty to report to Family Connections, previously known as the Children's Aid Society, because we all have a responsibility to keep children safe. And so we try to do that in a respectful way if we have to make a call to Family Connections on behalf of a child. And we try to do it in a very, very respectful way with the parent in the room so we can make that call together. And that's just a little education piece for folks in our community. So, Emily, I want to ask you about how you go about talking about human trafficking for youth, because there's such an elevated risk for especially vulnerable youth, but youth in general. What are some of the things that you talk to the youth about so that they can be better informed?
So we like to inform the youth that while in your youth, unfortunately, you will be one of the most targeted groups for the human trafficking, for the sex trafficking, all of that. So what we like to cover is who can be a potential trafficker, whether it looks like a partner, a family member, a new friend that you've made. We go over the typical places that recruitment takes place, so malls, public spaces, parking lots even. And then we go over some of the signs that you may be in a human trafficking situation, but be unaware. Because so often that is the case where somebody ends up getting wrapped up in that situation and the awareness is just, it's unknown because it's not a situation that is talked about nearly enough.
And I don't know if you can offer us an example about the different ways the human trafficking can look with regards to youth.
So human trafficking, typically it can begin with the pulling in. So you're going to get love bombed. You're going to get maybe expensive gifts like jewelry or a car to kind of get you in to stay. And then you'll begin the isolation pieces where the only form of contact you get is that person. You may not be able to reach out to your family, or you'll have your social medias monitored. You can have your bank accounts taken accountability of by somebody else. So there's quite a few things that are the beginning markers of the dangerous situation that can take place.
And I should imagine for our youth who may be unhoused, who have developmental challenges, mental health, substance use, who aren't getting a lot of guidance and supervision, who are struggling in school, can be the most vulnerable population of youth and the LGBTQ community as well for youth. Very, very vulnerable. Just speak to us about how vulnerability also can create higher risk for human trafficking.
Yes, so those vulnerable populations you just mentioned are also highly, highly, highly targeted simply because of the vulnerability, whether it be lack of housing, lack of funding. So those are pieces that those traffickers would latch onto and provide you a home, but there's this outcome that results in the trafficking or having to perform sexual acts. And then that can also be the potential draw for somebody to not realize that they're stuck in a bad situation because they now have a home over their head, they're being provided for, but it's in result of having to perform these not so fantastic acts and having to be put in such dangerous situations.
Absolutely. And when you, as a youth, if you get offered a free house to stay and all these luxuries, please just know that that is a high indicator of a potential trafficking situation that comes at a cost. And the cost is your body and your consent. And we do know that substance use and human trafficking pretty much go hand in hand. And so, Emily, our time has gone by so quickly. And so what I know, unfortunately, our violence prevention program, we were able to do for the last couple of years because we received a grant. And unfortunately, that is coming to an end, and we haven't been able to secure more funds to continue the program. So how are you keeping the content and the materials available to people? How are you keeping this program alive even after it ends at the end of December?
Yes. So all of the subjects that we cover in our violence prevention program are on the Women and Children Shelter website in the form of a 10 to 15-minute video. So that's accessible for teachers, for parents, or for youth who want more information about the subjects we covered. And moving forward, we've been developing the same topics that will be targeting larger and older age groups. So primarily women will be the recipients of the information that we're going to redevelop and help support them through their needs that they would be having.
And is that for the women so they understand their own healthy relationships? And is it to help them with children to have conversations with their own kids?
So the tools that we provide can be used for both. We have had some women who come in thinking that they're going to be using the information for themselves, for their families, and then they end up having great discussion points about a daughter, a son, even nieces and nephews have come into the conversations. So the goal is to just walk away with a piece of information that you've learned that you can apply, whether it be to your own life or to support somebody else whom you know through a situation that they may choose to disclose to you.
And that's wonderful. And our website, again, is barrieshelter.com. And you can go to the violence prevention program section where you can access those videos. And we really do encourage you, use that resource, reach out, find it, and study it. And take those wonderful tools that Emily has put on there to educate yourself and also to educate any of the youth and other women and kids that are in your life. We really do encourage that. So, Emily, we have very little time left, but I want to give you the last word. If there is a parent and a teacher who is struggling to have these conversations, where do they start? How do they start the conversation, a very delicate, sensitive conversation with the youth? How do they do that?
So the best advice that I like to give to the parents is try your best to be as informed about a topic that you can. So again, referring back to our website, directing them to the videos, or reaching out directly to us if you want more information. We do provide our presentations to youth groups, as we said. So if there's any direct reach out to me, my email is emily@sheltered.com, or you can email the Violence Prevention Program email at vp@barrieshelter.com.
And that would be emily@barrieshelter.com.
Yes.
So we want to thank you so much, Emily, for being here with us today. Great information. Take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.